I'm DavidShriner-Cahn. I am the founder and community builder behind Smashing the Plateau, which is an online resource for corporate refugees. These are high-achieving professionals who have left or are leaving the corporate space to start their own business, and they want to do more of what they love and get paid what they're worth. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about some of the ins and outs, the ups and downs of that journey, a little bit about me and my background and how I came to start the Smashing the Plateau community in particular. But we'll provide some guidance that you can use to learn how you can do a better job of fulfilling your passion and your dreams of working in your discipline as an entrepreneur. And as I said, doing more of what you love and getting paid what you're worth.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today I'm really excited to be bringing you a show where you're going to learn how to do more of what you want and love while getting paid to do the same. And I'm bringing DavidShriner-Cahn, who is a corporate refugee, by designation. He's going to be letting us know exactly what that entails and what that means in terms, of you building a profitable business of your dreams. Now, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Prosper.
Fantastic. And for those that are watching right now, the Online Prosperity Show is the ultimate destination for exclusive insights into today's most inspiring journeys. And if you're contemplating a leap from the corporate world into entrepreneurship, or just simply seeking motivation to pursue your passion, I think you're in the right place today. So our guest today is DavidShriner-Cahn, who, as I've already mentioned, came from a corporate background and now lovingly calls himself the corporate refugee. And he's now empowering other entrepreneurs to be, do, and have happier existence. And he transformed an unexpected job loss into a thriving mission. And he's also the host of the acclaimed podcast, Smashing the Plateau, that is recognized by Forbes and Inc. magazines, respectively. And David has dedicated his career to guiding high-performing professionals through the transition from corporate roles to successful entrepreneurial ventures. Now, this obviously wasn't always the start for David. So today we're going to be going through his journey where he navigated from the structured world of engineering and also made a slight detour into the non-profit management space, and also now is leading a community for entrepreneurs. And this is obviously a journey that is worth taking note of. So if you, like I said, are looking to build a profitable business of your own dreams, there's a community that will actually help you with the guidance that will help you grow and prosper. Now, David, I could go on and talk about things I'm not even qualified to talk about. You've called yourself a corporate refugee. Let us know what that means and how that came about.
So if you think about what the word refugee means, usually it means you start in one place and you end up somewhere else. There's often a journey associated with the transition or the transformation, as you mentioned, Prosper. And it also implies that there may be a few bumps along the way.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for opening us up with that. Now, your journey started off in engineering. Tell us a little bit about what that entailed and what was the expectation of what you were doing then?
So engineering is a very kind of specific training in a technical field. I had a good technical background, both before university and in my university training. And I had a rather short stint as an engineer. It was a total of about 4 years. And I did reasonably well. I had good jobs. Um, and then as you mentioned, I made a career transition into the nonprofit space, which was a much longer period. I was in nonprofit management roles for over 2 decades.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that. When would you have realized that engineering was not the thing that you wanted to continue pursuing?
Um, well, as I said, I did well. I wasn't, I wouldn't say that it fulfilled any deep passion particularly. And um, the wake up call came just after I finished my second year at my second job, and I had my annual performance review. It was a great review. I got a nice raise. And then a month later, my boss called me into his office and he says, David, I have good news and bad news. The good news is you're doing a good job. The bad news is you don't have a job here anymore.
Mm.
And the reason was that the company that I worked for had lost a lot of business and they ended up having to cut payroll significantly. They fired probably half the staff. So it wasn't performance related, but I was a bit blindsided by the whole thing. You know, in my training, we weren't trained at all in business. We were trained to solve technical problems, and that was what I focused on. And I realized that paying attention to the business side of things was maybe just as important, if not more so. And it was a time when there were some pretty significant layoffs, especially in engineering disciplines across certainly in the U.S. I don't know about globally, but certainly in the U.S. The economy wasn't great, and one of the things that when I started paying attention, I saw that there were professionals who were much older than me. A lot of them were, I would say, in their 50s, or maybe a little older, who were often just short of being eligible to retire with full retirement benefits, and they were getting laid off. And so I was like, well, if this happened to me at the early part of my career, maybe there's something else that I can do where I could decrease the likelihood of it happening again. And maybe I can work in a place that has a different attitude about team members.
Mm. Now,
So,
David,
a lot of things started going through my mind about what I wanted to do with my life, and was I really pursuing the right path in my career? Should I do something differently? So those were the seeds of how I ended up making the shift to the nonprofit space.
absolutely. And thank you so much for opening us up to that. Now, engineering is one of those jobs that if you ask a young boy, what do you want to be? They'd say either engineering or police officer or fireman or things of that nature. Was it a childhood dream or was it a product of, the education system that you ended up as an engineer?
It definitely wasn't a product of me being a young boy thinking that this is what I wanted to do. It was more, I did better in math and science in high school. And so it seemed kind of natural to study something in college that was math and science related. You can't get more math and science related than engineering. So
Mm,
it was a kind of logical linear step.
absolutely. And there were no any sort of point of references or role models that you would have seen from. It was just next logical step, like you said.
Um, it was the next logical step. I'm thinking that, it's a long time ago. I'm thinking like, who did I know? Maybe, friends of my parents, perhaps. Yeah, it wasn't like there were particular mentors or something.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, the reason why I'm asking this is, obviously after having done the training and everything else, after 4 years, and you obviously notice that there might not be something in it for you. So many people, would not have made that decision lightly. Now, you step into the not-for-profit industry there. What was the draw to that type of industry? And obviously it's a stark difference from the structured sort of engineering space to now having to deal with maybe the human side of things, in life.
Yeah, well, for me, the human side was what was attractive. That nonprofits have, they're created to create some kind of human impact, hopefully in a positive way. That's usually why they're created. So that appealed to me, and um, and I also thought that the relationship between employees and management might go deeper than just the bottom line.
Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously, you've had that experience now where you're doing all the engineering stuff, and you're doing well, but yet, the employers are smiling and letting you know that there's nothing left in it for you here. Now, what sort of place, not for profit sort of places did you work in? Maybe without mentioning names, what sort of
Yeah.
assistance or work were you involved in?
So they were community-based organizations and educational organizations.
Absolutely. All right. And this really paved you nicely into what you've now created, obviously, a community of entrepreneurs that has an educational sort of flair to it. 2 decades. That's a very long time. What made you stick into this?
Um, that's a great question. So the work was interesting. The I saw the kind of impact that we were making on a personal level with the people that we served, um, and and it was also steady paycheck. Like, why does one stay in a job? One of the big attractions is you get paid.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I quite like that sort of honesty because, yeah, we're obviously here for reasons best known to us, but most of the reasons why we stay within business is the profit of what we're gaining from it, not necessarily in a business context, but what are you gaining in exchange to the time that and emotion that you are putting to that actual thing.
Right.
Now,
And by the way, Prosper, one of the things that happens when you're in a corporate structure is that you're fitting into somebody else's structure in exchange for a steady paycheck.
And would that then explain the shift now that you then went into entrepreneurship? Because that's also a shift coming from the nonprofit space that you spent 2 decades into entrepreneurship. Can you maybe let us know how that shift happened when you started?
Sure. And the other context of the shift is that you're making a shift from, in particular, one of the things I found with people who are driven to entrepreneurship is they tend to want to create their own structure as opposed to fitting into somebody else's structure. And you do that. When you do that, you're relinquishing the possibility of somebody giving you recurring revenue in the form of salary, right? So you have to find ways to create the revenue you need to support your lifestyle. The trigger for me, and I'd thought about entrepreneurship actually when I made the the career transition early on from engineering to the nonprofit space, I had thought about doing something as an entrepreneur. I didn't know anybody who was an entrepreneur, didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. So it just wasn't particularly feasible, particularly when I needed to start producing income relatively quickly. But I thought about it since then and started to get to know had friends who were entrepreneurs, especially in the nonprofit space, people who were the major supporters or on the boards were usually very successful in business. So my knowledge of entrepreneurship and my perspective about it changed quite a bit, and and the actual trigger for me when I left my last job was there was a redundancy in my organization, and I was also told that my job was ending.
So this is the second
Right. So
time.
it was involuntary.
Absolutely. So had this redundancy, maybe in the engineering one, had it not happened, would you have moved ship, or do you know what would have happened?
Well, it's hard to say in hindsight. Would I have? I can tell you, it was probably way less likely, if not fairly unlikely, that I would have moved on my own without being pushed.
How about the
And,
second time around?
um, the second time around, it was um, it was not unlikely, but there were um, there were incentives to let it happen naturally and involuntarily
Hmm.
that m- helped make the transition easier.
Absolutely.
Right, easier on the one hand, I would say. Um, Emotionally, maybe not so much, right? Because when you choose something proactively and you say, I'm going to do this, it's very different than taking action that is in part reactively to something else.
I can only imagine because, like you keep referring to a steady paycheck and some sort of normality while you're within some sort of employ. But now you're out of the system, you're out of the engineering, you're out of the non-profit sector. The next thing that you had to do was get on and start your own sort of enterprise. Now, what sort of challenges did you face in the first few days or first few years, and what did you do to overcome them?
Um, so initially, my business was very much word of mouth, um, and it was through my network. I had some clarity about my target market and what I could offer. I certainly knew well what kinds of problems I could solve, or what my skills were. Um, but in terms of, I would say in terms of marketing, it was more happenstance as to like what kinds of consulting work came about initially. But things started to develop into a pattern, and I started doing some networking, and that shifted what kinds of business came in the door. So,
Absolutely.
like with many things, you start out thinking, "Oh, I'm going to do X," and then Y happens. So for example, I came out of the nonprofit space after 2 decades plus. So I knew a lot about how to run nonprofit organizations, and that was like, if you asked me my elevator pitch in that first year, it would have been focused on um, nonprofit clients. And much to my surprise, when I started doing some business networking, people that were running small businesses started asking me for help. And I wasn't pitching to them, but they got to know me, got to feel, I guess, the know, like, and trust factor started to build, and and suddenly I started to develop a small business clientele.
Absolutely.
Along with the nonprofit clients, and then over time, some of those, and then more and more of those clients were solopreneurs who had, like me, left a corporate job and started their own consulting or coaching or professional service business, and they were looking for help solving the same kinds of problems for their business that I had solved for mine a few years earlier.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you did was create a community around your business and the provision of service that you are doing. Now, there's nothing as difficult as trying to put together a whole bunch of people that have their own way of thinking and they really want independence to start off with, and that's the reason why they went into entrepreneurship. What sort of strategies did you employ to then cultivate the Smashing the Plateau community, and what makes it unique?
So I'll be honest, there was no strategy initially. It was totally happenstance. Just like I mentioned that I started picking up small business clients as a consultant, when I wasn't looking for them, the first community members also found me. I had a new client who did a session with me and said, I'd like to do more with you, but I'd really rather be in a group. And I'm like, oh, interesting. I had never thought about that. So I said to them, well, what do you think would be the minimum needed for a group? And we had a conversation, and we decided that if we could find two other people, a group of three was enough to get started, and we could, certainly add more people as time went on. And like many things that happen in life, something happens that kind of triggers an idea. And then as I was meeting other people, I started mentioning to them, what do you think about being in a group? Or, I mentioned this conversation that I had with that client. And, a few months later, there were two other people, and we started a group with three.
There's always a start.
Right. So again, it wasn't any great strategy. It was like totally kind of happenstance and being open to an opportunity when it shows up.
Absolutely. But what I like about this is this sort of played into your past experience, because you did mention that while in the nonprofit space, your roles included community building and obviously fostering education amongst the people. Did you draw from those sort of experiences, or was it a completely different audience that you had to now deal with?
Well, the audience, it was a different audience, but the skill sets are the same. So, professionally, I've always been, and personally too, always been involved in all sorts of communities. In some cases as a participant, in many cases taking on leadership roles. So I had a lot of experience in working in kind of a community setting, and I see the value of being part of a community. Being part of multiple communities. So that like working with a small group, which eventually became a community, that part of it was not a surprise. And I had background and skills that were very useful to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Right. Doing it specifically to focus on helping people that were primarily solopreneurs, working in the same discipline that they had been for most of their careers. That particular kind of community might have been different, but the actual, like the community building process is something that I've done many times.
Absolutely. So if somebody just so happens to be intrigued about this community, what can they expect when they jump inside?
Um, they can expect to meet some people who are very collaborative minded and open to sharing experiences and shared learning, so that it's a place where you can connect fairly quickly with many thinking partners. And if you think about what creates success, particularly long-term success, um, there's a lot of trial and error. Um, if you think about the way a baby learns to walk, they spend a lot of time falling down before they figure out how to balance holding on to something. And then eventually they figure out how to balance without holding on to something. And we may not be taught this in school, but honestly, I think most of business and life are taking a series of actions in an iterative fashion, where you make a plan, you take a step based on the plan, you look at the results, you analyze the results. Based on the results, you either go forward with the next step exactly as you had planned, or quite frequently, you make a tiny pivot in your plan based on what's already happened. Like what has worked well, what has not worked so well, where do you need to make a small change in your plan for the next step? And taking these steps, particularly if it's in unknown territory, can be hard. There can be a lot of fear associated with it, anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. And if you do this in association with like-minded people, where you're able to talk about what you're doing, what you're experiencing, if you're talking with other people and they're able to share similar kinds of experiences when they faced a similar challenge, all of those interactions help accelerate the rate of success, and they also help decrease the mistakes you're going to make along the way. Because you might be ready to take a step, and then somebody else tells you, "Oh, I tried something like that. Here's what happened. Here are some of the things you might want to watch out for." All right, those are things you may not be aware of till you have the conversation. But you need to be in a place where you're comfortable having these conversations, and other people are comfortable sharing their experiences with you. So it's having that kind of safe culture is a really important component of a community where you're trying to support one another.
Absolutely. I like that a lot, because I don't know if it's the same in New York there where you are, but they say not a lot of people go past the 3 year mark, especially when they get started in business by themselves. And that is just predicated on the fact that, everybody goes at it by themselves and thinking they can replicate whatever success they had within a role in corporate, in the everyday sort of business environment, which so many people will then notice that it's pretty much not the same. So in your experience, what are some of the common mistakes that, people that go from corporate and want to establish their own business make? And if they don't join communities like yours, which, all this education and experiences are exchanged, and people can be shown the right way so they can start doing more of what they love and getting paid for what they're worth.
Well, Prosper, the first mistake is not it's trying to do everything on your own. Like I think there's a myth in our culture that you should be able to figure all these things out on your own and generate success without talking to anybody about what's going on. And if you think about what helps drive success faster, it's a diverse set of people around you. And I have found that the greater the diversity, the more valuable the conversation is. Right. So if you get a room full of people all with the same skills and all who think the same way, that's not going to help a whole lot. Like, we've seen this in companies, we've seen it politically, where the CEO or the head of government has, for all intents and purposes, you can call it a political cabinet, or in a company, it might be the senior management team. When they look for people who are just like them and who are going to be yes men and women, that's a problem. You want people who are going to push back and are going to challenge you and are going to offer a divergent set of ideas.
You see, I blame Hollywood for this, David. I don't know if you've seen those Western movies where, a lone rider comes into a town and then everybody's sitting having lunch and he just walks straight to the barman, orders a whiskey shot, next that whiskey shot. And by the time he turns around, the whole town is behind him. And then he just starts fighting with all of them, obliterates the whole town. And then when nobody else is left for him to punch, he gets back on his horse and rides into the sunset. And I feel like that's how entrepreneurs want to show up in this whole world. But if you want to go far, yeah, you could go alone. But if you want to go further, you go together.
Exactly. I said it was part of the culture. So yes, it's very, very much so. You've nailed it, Prosper. So that the first mistake is trying to go it alone. You really need to build your team, your network, your community, and depending upon how much or how little capital you have to invest in resources, you can still build these kinds of teams and communities without a huge investment, particularly in today's world. It's so easy to connect with people very low cost or free. It's like, you and I are on opposite ends of the world. And yes, we may both have Zoom accounts, paid Zoom accounts, but we're not paying extra for the time that we're spending on this conversation, right? So we could spend, for the same amount of money, we can spend all day on Zoom calls with people from all over the world, which is incredible, right? So it's so easy to connect with people nowadays, and there are many ways that you can collaborate with other people without investing a lot of money. It's a mistake not to do it. So I would say that's like the first thing. Second thing is, as you're doing it, be really clear for yourself on what's important to you. What it is you're trying to build, how you want to spend your time. So one of the mistakes I see corporate refugees make is they leave the corporate environment where they're kind of sick of the politics and the structure, and then they create a business where they need to show up all the time to get paid, whether or not they're actually like billing out their services on a time-based model, which is a huge mistake. But without going too deep there, you need to think about, how do you actually want to spend your time? If entrepreneurship is appealing to you because it seems like you have the freedom to choose how you spend your time, then actually design a business that fits how you want to spend your time. I have a friend who has been in business about as long as me, about close to 20 years. And he's had various businesses along the way. The one that he's in now, he's been in for a while, and he has built a nice team. And he's also designed his business so that he is working in his business Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. He doesn't schedule any calls with clients or with team members on Mondays or Fridays, right? But if you want to have a business that will let you do that, you need to design the business so that it can support that. So the mistake I see is that people, they leave a corporate job, they create a consulting or a coaching business, and then, they get enough business to kind of keep things going. They reach a plateau, and they feel like they're kind of chasing their own tail. Um, and they end up thinking, well, I left the job because I hated my boss, I hated the structure, and I've created a new structure with a new boss that I hate even more, and that new boss is me. So you don't want to do that. So think about, like, design the business model so that it suits how you want to spend your time, and be really clear with yourself on your financial needs and what will be the most profitable use of your skills and your time in that business. How can you create a team around you that will support that kind of business? You don't necessarily need to have full-time employees to do this. There are a lot of ways to build a team without full-time employees. Again, technology makes it so much easier today, and the way people work today, there are so many ways to engage team members on a fractional basis that will help support your business. So so think about those things very clearly, and then when it comes to actually what you're working on in your business, I believe it's important to first set some very audacious goals that are future oriented. They're not metric driven, so there's always more to do. So, like, for example, you're in the digital marketing business, right?
Mm.
You can set a goal so that, if you take what happens on social media, if you take a particular niche in social media, you can have a particular social media related problem that you're trying to solve. So you're really clear when you know that you're working to solve it. Yet there can always be more people that you can serve who have this problem. So there's always more to do. So anyway, so if you set these goals that are specific, but not metric driven, that will kind of drive your energy for the foreseeable future, and then break those down into metric driven objectives so that you'll know when you achieve them. And these are much shorter term. I like to think of objectives in 90-day sprints, because it's a big enough chunk of time so you can work on something significant. So for example, you want to increase your client base by, I don't know, let's say 10% a year. So work on 2.5% per quarter. How are you going to get that 2.5% increase in number of clients? What actions are you, then you break that down into what actions you need to take every single week over 12 weeks to meet that objective. I've seen, people have an objective when they're first trying to build a team. I want to get my first virtual assistant on board. That's a good objective for a 90-day period. Takes time to find somebody, takes time to onboard somebody. You want to make sure that they're working well. So have a good 90-day objective, have a set of weekly action plans, and then have a way, and this is where the community piece comes into play and is so important. Have a way to connect with thinking partners so you can discuss what you're working on. And if you do this in a weekly cadence, it can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking us through that. Now, obviously, there's a lot of learning. Like, you're taking people from a space where they had everything done for them. Now they're going to have to work through them being the person making decisions and things of that nature. And so throughout this, there's a lot of education, which I suppose is baked into the community. But one of the ways that you're utilizing is a podcast, which I've been a guest on. And thank you so much for inviting me on there. And this podcast has been recognized by Forbes and Inc. magazines, respectively. What inspired you to get started on this podcast, and how has it evolved over time?
So one of the things I've always looked at is if I want to go from point A to point B, who's already at point B or beyond that I can look to as a model? Like, what are they doing that I'm not doing, where I can learn from them? And um, early in my consulting business, I saw that other consultants who I thought were ahead of where I was and where I wanted to be, they were creating content. And in those days, it was mostly blogs. So first, I created a blog, and I actually started a small team to help with that because it wasn't one of my skill sets and wasn't kind of my go-to thing. And then the podcast ended up, it was one of these iterations on the blog. So one of our team members said, and actually we had made some changes in the blog to try to grow the audience. We were successful in growing the audience. We did a survey, and the survey came back. They wanted greater depth than we were able to provide in the blog. And so one of our team members suggested, why don't we do audio interviews? And keep in mind, this was 2014. So the world of podcasting was very different than it is now. And I said to him, well, how would we do that? And he said, oh, I think it's pretty simple. I have a friend who has a podcast. And so, we had a few conversations and we started putting the pieces together and we launched a podcast. And we've released episodes every week since then.
Absolutely. See, all of those things require you to constantly be learning, innovating, and obviously keeping on top of things that are moving the needle for those that you're going to be working with. Now, the people that you work with, we've established they're coming from corporate. They're obviously have all these highs and lows. I kind of feel like you end up becoming their coach, mindset, and things of that nature, really helping them, navigate the ebbs and flows of entrepreneurship and things of that nature. How do you then address these emotional aspects, from these career transitions, such as if somebody has left a job, they call themselves an engineer, but if you're an entrepreneur now, you can't keep calling yourself that. So that means you've got an identity loss, or you now have that fear of failure and things that really affect, people that are starting a business, whether internal or external. Externally, I'm talking things like the pandemic or anything else that could come along that could just disrupt, the way people are working.
Yeah. You're right for focusing on this, Prosper. Mindset is huge, and it's one of the biggest issues. And there is a lot of emotional turmoil that comes along with entrepreneurship in general. And when you're going through that transition from corporate to running your own business, there's a lot of emotional turmoil. You may feel a sense of loss. There's a grieving process when you've left a job behind. One of the things that happens is that your social network may disappear. So whether you leave voluntarily or involuntarily, you go from a place where you had a full calendar, an overflowing inbox, and this pool of people that you were interacting with all the time. And then when you leave, often you're seen as a pariah. Sometimes it's because you got pushed out, and sometimes when you leave voluntarily, they don't quite get it. They don't quite get, like, why would you leave? And some people may be envious of it. And so that social fabric all of a sudden seems to have disappeared. You're spending a lot of time alone. And we know what happens when you face big challenges and you spend a lot of time alone. Exactly. The result is usually not so good. So, so mindset is really critical. You've got to be able to get up in the morning and be able to sell yourself. Like even if you were in a marketing or sales role, working for a company, it's very different emotionally selling the company that you work for versus selling your own business, especially in a small professional service business. You're selling yourself. And what you're also doing, especially in the beginning, you're selling a promise to deliver something that you don't feel like you have a track record delivering. Yes, you may have done it in this corporate setting, but doing it in your own business, I've seen like people, they don't have the confidence that they can actually deliver on it. If you've done it over and over and over again with lots of different clients, you over time you gain more confidence. But that the lack of self-confidence, it never goes away 100%. Again, this is where community can be helpful. The people around you will say, no, but you can do this. You have all these skills. Here's how you've done it. They remind you. And I've seen another thing that comes along with that's a mindset issue, especially when your self-confidence is low, is I've seen people undercharge.
Mm.
That's a big one. And again, if you're in a community and you're talking about these things, people will call you on it. They'll say, oh, no, you shouldn't be charging $5,000 for that project. You should be charging $25,000 for that project, right? That's a huge difference. And I've seen this happen many times. And people go from businesses where they're struggling to pay their bills to having businesses where they have long-term contracts that are either tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars because they have done the mindset work with their colleagues.
See, that sort of bakes in also that accountability, because if you're just being by yourself at home or within your office, you wouldn't know what other people are doing. And even if you knew, you would just be like, you know what, it's just me that has to deal with this. So accountability obviously now seems to be, rearing its, into what it is that you're creating here as well, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are watching, and I think they've had, enough to maybe get them intrigued as to what would be the next thing and how can they become part and parcel of this community that you have built. Is there an initiation ceremony, or is there a rite of passage that somebody has to encounter? Or
the rite of passage is pretty simple. We have an application form on our website, smashingtheplateau.com. We also have a contact form. You can contact me. I'd be happy to chat with you about where you are in your career, what might be a good next step, how this kind of community may or may not suit your needs and what you're looking for and what kinds of challenges you're facing. So it's a simple process. You could come and visit a live session to see some of the other members who are in the community. We try to make it easy.
Absolutely. And what sort of commitment does somebody have to do just so they mentally prepare for this?
You need to be present. You need to be ready to listen. You need to realize that the communication and the conversations that happen inside the community are confidential to members of the community. So if you come as a visitor, be prepared to leave behind what you may have heard, and feel comfortable in the same vein, feel comfortable sharing a little bit about yourself, because as a visitor, you will also get some valuable feedback. So be prepared to come and share a challenge that you're facing so you can see how people in the community might respond to that, might be able to support you.
Absolutely. I've also noticed on your website, smashingtheplateau.com, there's a bunch of testimonials from people, within the community and people that are singing praise. What is sort of like the average tenure or the length of stay that somebody has stayed with you within this community?
Well, the longest is that person I mentioned earlier on who said, I'd like to work with you, but I'd like to work in a group. That was 10 years ago.
Wow. And they're still coming every single day and they're smashing the plateau with all the latest and greatest. Fantastic. And obviously, I will put all those links in the show notes below so that people can actually get started there. But obviously, you're too close to the product and you've got vested interest in getting people to join your community. What would you say, or why shouldn't anyone join this community?
Why should they or should they not?
Why shouldn't they?
Oh, if you're not ready to commit some time to self-improvement, it's probably not going to help you. If you're not ready to share a little bit about what your needs are and where you're challenged, then no one's going to know what's keeping you up at night, and they're not going to be able to help you. So if you want to solve things on your own, that's fine, but I don't think this community could be helpful.
Absolutely, because then that really makes it clear for that person who's just excited about obviously seeing you on the video, but they don't quite know whether this is right for them or not. And it also saves you a lot of trial and error with people that might not be the right fit for this. Now, for some of us that are excited to jump on board and, you know, be welcomed by you, David, what's next for this community? What can we be excited about that will be like, oh, right, if I join in right now, we might be going to Vegas, or where's the community headed?
Well, we've actually had some interesting, speaking of Vegas, we've had some interesting interesting happenings that have evolved from the community when the current framework we started in 2022, and we were kind of deep into COVID, and there was an awful lot of stuff happening online. Last year, some of the members were really itching to meet in person, and planning an in-person event, particularly when you have members who are all over the place, can be both challenging and expensive. So it wasn't on my radar, but they wanted to do it, and we ended up having an in-person event here in New York. We do have enough members close enough to New York to be able to make it work out for a one-day event. And they liked it so much that we had another one in January, and we're planning another one. I don't know when this episode will actually be live, but there's another one happening in June this year. So far, all in New York. But New York is a very exciting place to visit. It's, in my opinion, as exciting as Vegas, if not more so. But maybe I'm biased. So in the future, there may be more in-person events.
Absolutely. Yeah. So many other people, especially, given light to the circumstances that we had to go through, lots of people want to connect with other, like-minded people in sort of an in-person sort of event. But David, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your day to share with us what you guys are doing, and especially offering people an opportunity to do more of what they love and literally getting paid for what they're worth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prosper.
Fantastic. And for those that are watching right now, as you can tell, David's journey from obviously the structured corporate environment to now leading a dynamic entrepreneurial community is just a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of aligning one's career with personal passions. And I think his work with Smashing the Plateau just really offers these invaluable insights that if anyone is considering, going into entrepreneurship, really do consider the links that I'm going to be putting in the show notes below. But as David has said, you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. In the comments below, I want you to maybe share your experiences and thoughts on entrepreneurship and where you're at in your journey right now. As David said, you will be asked or encouraged to share where you're at within the community. So this could be a first practice run. David is going to be looking at those comments below to see if you are a good fit. And I think if you are, he will kindly tap you on the shoulder and invite you to come check out what they are doing at Smashing the Plateau. So this is for you if you've maybe faced a significant career transition, or you're looking for ways to navigate, entering the entrepreneurial sort of space. Your story could inspire someone else on their journey. And don't forget to subscribe to the Online Prosperity Show so you don't miss out on exclusive insights like this. Until next time, can't wait to see how you are going to be smashing your own plateau. Bye for now.